Hello, my name is Carmen Hines, and I will be talking to you today about the competing values framework. Deeply embedded in the organizational literature is the construct of effectiveness. In 1977, Goodman and Pennings wrote New Perspectives on Organizational Effectiveness, in which they argued that effectiveness is the central theme in all organizational analyses and that it's difficult to conceive a theory of organization that does not include the effectiveness construct. Another theorist, Campbell, reviewed Goodman and Penning's work and discovered that while effectiveness is clearly a construct of central importance, it was not without problems. The major problem was the elusiveness of the definition. What does effectiveness really mean? Reviewing Goodman and Penning's work, Campbell was able to condense the literature and create a criteria of effectiveness that contained 30 criteria on a list. This was a great improvement from Goodman and Penning's work, but this list contained imprecise definitions and conceptual overlap between the 30 criteria. Then comes Robert E. Quinn and John Rohrbaugh, and they're the creators of the competing values framework. Seeking to provide a method for making these abstract notions more explicit and precise, Quinn and Rohrbaugh reviewed Campbell's list and used his 30 criteria as a basis for their study. Their two-part study produced the competing values framework. Quinn and Rohrbaugh conducted an initial exploratory study employing a panel of 7 experts and a second study in which a group of 45 theorists and researchers participated. In the first stage, participants were asked to use Campbell's 30 indices and apply 4 decision rules to eliminate any criterion from the list which was not 1. At the organizational level of analyses, 2. A singular index, 3. Not a construct, or 4. Not a criterion of organizational performance. The exploratory study reduced Campbell's list significantly from the 30 indices to 3 criteria of effectiveness. In the second stage, participants were asked to evaluate the similarity between every possible pairing of the remaining 3 criteria. The results of this stage were used to create the competing values framework. So let's talk about the competing values framework. The first value dimension is related to organizational structure and the relationship between flexibility and control. From an emphasis on stability to an emphasis on flexibility. Flexibility means dynamism, creativity, and innovation, whereas stability means control, process standardization, and order. The second value dimension is related to organizational focus and considers internal versus external orientation, from an internal micro-emphasis on well-being and the development of people in the organization to an external macro-emphasis on the well-being of development of the organization itself. The third value dimension we'll get into is related to the organizational means and ends, from an emphasis on important processes to an emphasis on final outcomes. This dimension represents the objectives of organizations and the means through which they sustain themselves and attain their objectives. So as you can see, the framework has 4 quadrants, and each quadrant represents a different model. So in the upper left, we have the human relations model, which is based on cohesion and morale, with an emphasis on human resource and training. People are not seen as isolated individuals, but as cooperating members of a common social system with a common stake in what happens. Next is the open systems model, which is based on an organic system with an emphasis on adaptability, readiness, growth, resource acquisition, and external support. These processes bring innovation and creativity, where people are not controlled but inspired. Through flexibility and readiness, they bring growth and resource acquisition to the organization. Then comes the internal process model. It's based on hierarchy and has an emphasis on measurement and documentation and information management. These processes bring stability and control. Hierarchies seem to function best when the task to be done is well understood and when time is not an important factor. Through information management and communication, they bring stability and control to the organization. Then is the rational goal model. It's based on profit with an emphasis on rational action. It assumes that planning and goal setting results in productivity and efficiency. Tasks are clarified, objectives are set, and action is taken. Through planning and goal setting, they bring productivity and efficiency to the organization. While the models seem to be four entirely different perspectives or domains, they can be viewed as closely related and interwoven. They are four subdomains of a larger construct: organizational and managerial effectiveness. The four models in the framework represent the unseen values over which people and programs, policies, and organizations live and die. The four effectiveness criteria models in the competing values framework are also called four organizational cultural types. The four culture types are clan, adhocracy, hierarchy, and market, respectively. I'll walk you through the culture type for each quadrant and the type of employee that you're likely to see within that culture. So, from the human relations model, you get the clan culture. And the clan culture is internally oriented and is reinforced by a flexible structure. The typical clan culture sustains its power through trust and commitment and provides efforts to increase communication networks between members. As a result, we can find significant evidence of affiliation and membership behavior, as well as teamwork activities across the organization. The higher level outcomes of clan culture result in more employee morale and satisfaction and commitment. And you're likely to find mentors and facilitators in the company in a clan culture. Next is the adhocracy culture, and it's extremely externally oriented and is supported by a flexible culture. Members are encouraged to take risks and to implement new ideas, products, and services. People seek creativity and adaptability to environmental changes. You're likely to see the innovators here and the brokers in an adhocracy. Next, in the internal process model quadrant, you'll find the hierarchy culture. And the hierarchy culture is internally oriented and supported by an organizational structure that's reinforced by internal control mechanisms. Members tend to expect conformity and predictability, whereas managers expect organizational outcomes such as zero errors, detection, efficiency, timeliness, and rigor. You're likely to find the monitors and the coordinators in your company, in the hierarchy. And then last, in the rational goal model quadrant, is the market culture. And the market culture is externally oriented, and the organizational structure is reinforced by mechanisms of control. The culture reinforces competitiveness in order to meet stakeholders' expectations. To assist in high levels of performance, clear objectives and reward systems are developed, and employee development is normally reinforced. You're likely to find your producers and your directors here. So the competing values framework is here now, and it received its name because the criteria within the four models seem at first to carry these conflicting messages. We want our organizations to be adaptable and flexible, but we also want them to be stable and controlled. The competing values framework can be applied to teams, business units, organizations, or a conglomeration of companies using the same process. Typical uses of the approach include improving performance management processes, developing customized innovation processes, creating shared visions and values, and developing high performing teams and leaders, and launching innovation initiatives. Here are some examples of the competing values framework and how they're applied to some companies that many of you will recognize. So for the clan culture, we have Build-A-Bear Workshop. And the clan culture is full of shared values and common goals, an atmosphere of collectivity and mutual help. And Build-A-Bear builds their core values around unity and team building, including words like collaborate and celebrate. It's internally focused on making sure employees are able to advance from within, and they're really committed to creating a family environment for their employees. The accuracy culture focuses on taking risks and implementing new ideas and products or services. And Facebook is a great example. Their core values revolve around innovation and agility. CEO Mark Zuckerberg once said to move fast and break things. And unless you're breaking stuff, you're not moving fast enough. The company constantly adapts and experiments to try to stay ahead of the rest of the social media platforms. The market culture focuses on the transactions, while the environment outside the organization, instead of the internal management. The organizational goal is to earn profits through market competition. And GE is a great example, General Electric, of this. The CEO, Jack Welch, vowed that every GE business unit must rank first or second in its respective market or face being sold off. In Glassdoor.com, an employee review showed that GE is a company that makes big changes at once instead of making small adaptations. And for the hierarchy culture, they have a clear organizational structure and its standardized rules and processes, strict control, and very well defined responsibilities. A good example of a hierarchy culture is McDonald's. It's a large corporation that's widely known for its consistency and uniform structure. The basis for the term McDonaldization means that everything has a routine or a set process, and companies place emphasis on predictability and coordination. One of the challenges of the competing values framework is that the spatial model is an oxymoron. It's literally a combination of seemingly contradictory or incongruous concepts. Let's take a look at it. Because although certain pairs are at opposite locations in value and space, and therefore paradoxical in nature, this does not mean that they are empirical opposites or mutually exclusive in actual organizational environments. Indeed, an organization might be cohesive and productive, or stable and flexible. So, for this reason, the competing values framework can prevent us from being able to see opposites as equally true or valued, or from recognizing a simultaneous antithesis that exists in nature. So, I would recommend modifying the framework by removing the directional arrows from the x and y axes. And by having these directional arrows, they infer a spatial value or like a strength or distance. And they express that because certain pairs of concepts are located on opposite poles in the spatial model, they can share no place in a consistent or convergent theory of organization. Again, the model doesn't have to express opposites or mutually exclusive quadrants where both can actually exist within an organization. So instead of this, what it looks like now, it would just look like this, without the arrows. Through the competing values framework, we learned that organizational effectiveness is not a concept. It is a socially constructed, abstract notion derived from the heads of organizational theorists and researchers. In this presentation, we've discussed the theorists behind the framework, the competing values framework itself that brings us all closer to an explicit statement of the effectiveness construct. We've indicated the four models into which the concepts cluster. We've shown how the four approaches are differentiated, and I've suggested how the framework could be improved. The problems of effectiveness are complex, and this work does not fully resolve many of the thorny issues in the field, but at minimum, it provides a clarification in language and allows us to more fruitfully pursue the current debate about the utility and the future of the effectiveness construct in organizational analysis, development, and design. Best of luck to you as you use the competing values framework in your business. Thank you.